Hey, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. Today we have one of our most requested videos. Today we're going to be talking to you about Acer palmatum Uki-Gumo. Now we're here in one of our display gardens. We're actually in mid-May right now. You can kind of see some of the colors this tree's holding. And Uki-Gumo can be inconsistent at best. We get a lot of questions about this one because some seasons it'll be green, some seasons it'll be white. It's one tree that we always are upfront and let people know that it's not always amazingly white, but we can give you some tips in this video to give you the best success rate at having your tree be the most spectacular colors possible. Now, a couple years ago, I was visiting my friend Augustin in the south of France, and he's got a lot of heat there, and Augustin said, "Oh, mine's always white." Well, the year I visited, it happened to skip that year, I guess, because it was the one year when I got there, he said, "Oh, it's very green this year." I said, seems like that happens a lot when I'm visiting to see that perfect Uki-Gumo. But we do have some tips to make Uki-Gumo an amazing tree in the landscape. This is an upright tree that when it leaves out perfectly, it's going to have that bright white characteristic to it that does fade to a soft green midsummer. But one of my favorite things about this tree is actually the fall color. Uki-Gumo has some amazing oranges in the fall to reds, but it's really that orange part of it that lights it up and makes it an exceptional fall colored plant.
And this Uki-Gumo Matt's been talking about is also known as the floating clouds maple. I love this plant because it's just so poetic. If you look at this tree behind me and you see this white on this tree right now, it really looks like floating clouds out there in this garden. I love using the whites in the landscape, just like I love using the yellows. They're great for lightening up those dark places out there in the landscape. Uki-Gumo, though, may only show white every 1 to 2 years out of 3 years. So think about using this as a fall color planting, and then when this thing is really white, you've got an extra added bonus in the landscape. Because this tree is a great tree. Even when it's not white, it has some really good fall colors. So think about this as a great tree that can really give you some of that bold oranges in the fall. And you can use that to contrast with a lot of your other Japanese maples out there in the landscape. And then when this thing's white, wow. Make sure to use those tips though, with planting this with protection from the hot afternoon sun, avoiding that fertilizer, and really putting this tree in the right spots where this tree can really shine when it is white. Because when it's white, it's electric. It's one of the most amazing trees out there in the landscape and garden. I like to pair this tree out there in the landscape with anything that's not white. And that's almost every other plant out there. And that's what makes this tree so amazing in the garden, is when this thing's white, it looks unreal. It looks like someone has went out there and colored your tree out there in the landscape. It looks fake, but it's amazing and adds so much to your garden because that white color is just so unreal and unbelievable that a lot of people will be stopping and saying, "What is that tree?" when this tree does go to those white phases. Uki-Gumo, or the floating clouds maple, is one of my personal favorites. And when it's white like this, it really shines in the garden.
Now, Uki-Gumo leaves out in the early spring with that light white, like I said. We're actually here in zone 6B in western North Carolina, and I have this tree in a high shade canopy. It actually is an oak canopy, giving it max coverage. Now, the trick to Uki-Gumo and making it look its best is leafing Uki-Gumo out extremely slowly. You don't want this tree to leaf out very quickly. So if you have it in the greenhouse, it's often less colored than if it was in the landscape. So it's a tree that looks better in its natural setting out in the ground. The tree's going to leaf out slower when those roots are actually in soil. That root temperature is going to be very determinative there. And you don't want this tree to have a very fast push spring. So you want to go little to no nitrogen on your fertilizer with this one. So it's leafing out slowly and consistently. That's going to give you your best colorations for white, and also providing it with some shade. You know, the more shade, the better with this one typically. If you can get it in at least early morning sun, late day shade, you're going to slow that leaf out time down. And by doing that, you're going to get better colorations. Now, some springs in very hot climates, it's impossible to control that. And we definitely acknowledge that. If you're in a very, very hot zone 8 or zone 9, it may be leafing out very quickly for you. And it may be that it has to mature more to shade its own self out and kind of control that color pattern there. But if you can provide, you know, a good bit of shade, especially on those roots, you're going to leaf that tree out much slower, and those colors get so much more intense if you can get that slower overall springtime leaf out. Now, like I said, fertilizer is a big factor in that too. So little to no nitrogen on this one. You don't want to be pushing this tree to leaf out faster. A slow, steady spring will give this one its best colorations. Now, I love this tree for its upright stature. It's a nice size leaf. The tree actually grows quite a bit for us. It's typically around a foot of growth a year at around 10 to 12 foot, even in 10 years, and just a lovely overall tree. Now, when you get this one sited correctly, that color is to die for. I mean, it's one that's highly sought after in the Japanese maple world for that bright white splash it puts there in the landscape. And we're very upfront about that. It can be inconsistent with that. Now, it's not one that typically reverts. So if you can find the right condition for this, you can essentially create that condition more frequently for yourself in the landscape. So I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Acer palmatum Uki-Gumo, and I hope these tips give you some confidence in growing it, as well as tips to get it to its best success rate and give you the best whites in that early spring garden. Thanks for watching. God bless and have a great day.